Hello people of YouTube, my name is JXDKid and welcome to another list of gods I would like to see in Smite. For this list, I will be presenting 2 gods per pantheon. I will tell you the role I think the god will play, the abilities and passive that I think they will have, as well as any additional notes pertaining to that god. Side note, I was unable to create any ability sets for some Hindu gods because my research and the resources I have for that research are very limited and have not been able to provide me with enough information to create a satisfying ability set for any of the Hindu deities. I apologize in advance, but that is just how it is. So, without further ado, let us begin with the Roman Pantheon. First, for the Roman Pantheon, I would like to see Atlas, the titan that holds the sky. Atlas would likely be a guardian, with a passive ability that I call Heavy Burden, in which, as he takes damage, he builds stacks, gaining bonus protections, and maybe bonus attack power, but primarily the protections. Then, for one of his abilities, I call it Share the Burden. When this ability activates in an area around him, enemies are slowed and he gains a movement speed buff based on the number of enemies hit with this ability. It doesn't do damage, it simply slows the enemy while speeding Atlas up, because it's meant to show or act as if he's giving the enemy portions of the sky to hold, and with them holding it, he has a lighter burden so he can continue moving. I think that this would likely, the slow would likely be increased by how many stacks in his passive he has, and maybe he'll lose some of those stacks if he does use this ability, kind of like Poseidon's Tide. So next is an ability I call Buckle Down, in which he gains a sanctuary effect, however he has to stop moving. So unlike current sanctuary where you can move around while you're invincible, you just can't attack or anything, he stops and sanctuaries and then begins healing over time. However, unlike normal sanctuary, this can be cancelled willingly, or he can be silenced, stunned, mesmerized, any hard CC out of it. So if he's doing this ability, he heals until either a time limit is reached, he cancels it himself, or he's hit by some form of hard crowd control. Next, the ability that I call Pull of the Earth. It's basically a Poseidon, what is that ability called? The Poseidon Whirlpool. Like, it pulls people towards the center, however, the center in this case is Atlas. It does minor damage, and he is able to move slowly while using this ability. Next, for his ultimate, I call it Drop the Weights. He drops the skies on a target location, damaging and stunning enemies hit. He would likely gain a speed buff because the idea is he is throwing the skies off of his shoulders onto the ground location. And this ability would likely do more damage the more stacks that he has. So that way, if he has maximum stacks in his passive, it's as if he's dropping a heavier load of the sky onto the enemy. Second, for the Roman Pantheon, I would like to suggest the Minotaur, the Beast of the Labyrinth. The Minotaur would likely be a warrior, or possibly, because this would also make sense, simply a Hercules skin, because while coming up with abilities for the Minotaur, I kept coming back to Hercules. So it would work either way, and I'd be just as happy, to be honest. So for the Minotaur, I came up with the passive Beast of the Maze, in which the Minotaur gains movement speed and attack power when inside the jungle, because the Minotaur is trapped inside the labyrinth, and the jungle is kind of maze-like in Conquest, so that made sense to me. Then one of his abilities I call Barge. He runs forward, and the first enemy hit is damaged, knocked back, and stunned. However, this stops his dash. The knockback does not cause damage like the Sleeping Giants, whose name I forgot. I apologize. But the person knocked back doesn't do damage, but they're just knocked back and stunned. And when it says the first enemy hit, it does include minions, because that just seems a bit excessive if it went through the minions. Then a second ability I came up with, I call Smash. He smashes the ground in front of him, dealing damage and knocking up enemies in a cone, similar to Geb's. However, his next attack for the couple of seconds after that ability will hit all of the enemies within range of his swing, similar to Bellona's hammer. Then his third ability, which I call Unstoppable Force, the Minotaur charges forward, knocking aside and damaging enemies hit, similar to Sun Wukong's bull form. However, in this case, he is CC immune during the charge. And then next, for his ultimate ability, I call the Labyrinth. Enemies around him have their controls wonkied, reversed, whatever. Just scrambled, I guess, would be the best word. Wonkied isn't a word. But have their controls scrambled for a short time. So forward may make them go backward. It may make them go sideways. It's random. However, it would also give him an attack buff. So while your enemies are moving around crazily trying to figure out what's going on with their controls, you'll be able to attack them with great ferocity and power. Next, for the Egyptian pantheon, I would like to suggest Thoth, the god of wisdom. Thoth would likely be a mage with a passive that I call Book of the Dead. As minions and gods die around him, he will gain stacks, and these stacks might increase his magical power. However, although there is a maximum number of stacks he can have, the amount of stacks he has will reset upon his death. For his first ability, I call it Hieroglyphics. At a target location on the ground, flashes a hieroglyphic, dealing damage to enemies in the area. And based on the number of passive stacks he has, it could have one of a selection of secondary effects. My suggestion is at the lowest tier have slowing, then second tier rooting, then third tier just flat out stunning them. Then next, for his second ability, I call it the Arts. In an area around him, allies are inspired by the beauty of art, giving them a movement and attack buff. Movement speed buff and attack power buff. Then for his third ability, Thoth launches a projectile that does bonus damage based on the difference in level between him and the enemy god hit. This projectile would go through minions and only hit gods, not only hit gods. It'll go through minions, damaging them, but the bonus damage only applies to gods. It stops at the first god hit, dealing a base damage and then some bonus damage based on the difference in level. Then, last for his ultimate, I call Astrology. He summons a Starry Night at a ground location, slowing and doing damage to enemies. Enemies inside the area will not be able to see outside of the area, kind of like Xbalanque's ultimate. However, it's not global and it doesn't follow them. They can just walk out of it. However, it does do damage and slows them down. Second, for the Egyptian pantheon, I suggest Horus, the rightful king. That's the title I gave him because of reference to the set's title of the usurper, which I shared in a previous video. Horus would likely be a warrior. His passive would be called the Eye of Horus, and he gives gods around him additional protections and minions additional attack power, as well as his wards having increased range of vision. His first ability would be called Kingly Orders. Allies around him gain movement speed and attack power, as if he just ordered an attack and they're ready to oblige. Next, for his second ability, I call it Powerful Winds, as he is a sky god. Around him, enemies are damaged and knocked upward, similar to Sobek's Tailspin, but maybe like the knockup lasts a bit longer. Next, for his third ability, I call it Justice. He dashes forward and deals damage to the first god hit, as well as any minions he passes through while dashing. He does bonus damage based on how much health he is missing at that point to a specific point, because if he has like 1 health, that ability won't one-hit someone. That would be insane. However, if his health is low enough, he will stun the enemy along with some of that bonus damage. Then, for his ultimate, which I called My Kingdom, he summons a massive obelisk in a ground target location. Around it, his allies gain healing over time and additional protections. If an enemy is hit by the obelisk as it is summoned, they are stunned. Kind of similar to Bellona's ultimate, however it's not a leap, it is simply raising a giant obelisk from the ground, similar to one of Anher's abilities. However, it'll obviously be visually distinct from, as well as having a wider radius. Next is the Chinese pantheon. I would like to apologize in advance if I mispronounce any of the names of any of the deities. So, first, for the Chinese pantheon, I would like to suggest Xiao Baji, the lustful pig beast. For those of you who do not know, Xiao Baji is a character from A Journey to the West and an ally to Sun Wukong on the titular Journey to the West. He is, as mentioned before, a pig beast who was forced to go on the Journey to the West because he was a lustful glutton, hence the title Lustful Pig Beast. Now, for his passive, I call it Gluttony, as reference to the fact that he is a glutton, and he gains additional benefits from all consumables. So healing potions heal him more, mana potions regain more mana, damage potions increase the amount of damage he does more than usual. Then for his first ability, I call it Glutton, and for this ability he violently devours food, slowing and damaging enemies nearby while also healing himself. Then for his second ability, I call it the Nine-Toothed Rake, as that is the weapon that he wields in the story, as well as if he becomes a character in Smite. So it lays out a targeter in front of him, and then from the far end of the targeter, a rake-like projectile comes towards him, pulling enemies towards him like a rake does. So you activate this ability, then at a certain distance in front of him, a giant rake type thing appears, comes towards him, damaging anyone hit and pulling anyone hit towards him. Similar to Susanoo's pull ability. However, this is only in a straight line, and doesn't matter how it hits them, it will pull them, so long as it hits. Then, for his third ability, I call it Repulsive Nature. When this ability is active, if he is hit with a melee basic attack, the attacker is knocked back. Also, while this ability is active, he gains bonus protections. So this ability is meant to be used as his way of sort of body blocking, preferably melee characters. So he just gets in the way, they attack, and the person is just repelled backwards, putting distance between the person he's supporting and the person attacking. Next, for his ultimate, I call it Boar Rush. He embraces his pig-like form and charges forward, becoming CC immune and dealing massive damage, knocking enemies aside. And similar to Sun Wukong's bull form or Geb's rollout, he has some control of this form, so he can turn as he sees fit. Next, for the Chinese pantheon, is Xiao Rong, the god of fire. I see Xiao Rong being a warrior, and his passive, which I creatively call fire. With each basic attack, he gives an enemy a stack of spark, as I called it, and if they get enough stacks, they will be set on fire. The stacks that they get will decrease over time, and the more stacks they have, the longer they will be burning until the stacks get under the burning threshold. So as he attacks people, he keeps giving them stacks even if they're already on fire. So if he maintains the pressure, they will be on fire almost indefinitely. However, there will be a maximum number of spark stacks, so that if you do get away, it's not like you'll have enough stacks to walk you back to the fountain. So for his first ability, I call Riding Tiger, because in many depictions of Xiao Rong, he is riding a tiger. So he summons his tiger and mounts it, gaining great forward speed and attack power, but greatly cutting their backwards and sideways movement. While he's on his riding tiger, he can't use any other abilities. However, he does have more attack power, so he has to actually cancel the ability rather than leap forward like Awilix's Suku. So his second ability I call Heavenly Fire. He explodes a fire on a ground target location, doing damage and adding stacks of spark. Then for his third ability, I called it Increase Intensity. He damages enemies in a cone. If they are currently on fire, it does extra damage, and this ability will also apply the stack of spark to the enemy. Next, for his ultimate ability, I call it Heavenly Executioner, as that is one of his jobs within the Chinese pantheon. He dashes forward and executes God's hit if they are within a certain health threshold. If he executes someone, he can dash again until he stops executing enemy gods. If he does not execute, he still, however, does some great damage to the person. However, this ability does not activate stacks of spark, unfortunately. Depending on how you look at it, I guess. Next, for the Japanese pantheon. The first god for the Japanese pantheon I would like to suggest is Yuki-onna, the Snow Woman. I am aware that Yuki-onna is technically not a god, but neither is Arachne or Medusa, so I think it's fine. So Yuki-onna would likely be a mage with a passive I call Blizzard Warning. As she kills minions, or maybe just as she basic attacks, she gains stacks that will later be used for her ultimate. Her first ability I call Frostbite. She throws forward a projectile that explodes on the first enemy hit, damaging and slowing all enemies hit by the explosion. However, the projectile does more damage than the explosion because it hits them twice. So the projectile hits someone, then the explosion will hit that same person. So 1 hit, 2 hit. However, everyone around them will only be hit once by the explosion. Then her second ability I call Snow Day. It creates a snowy area around her, healing her allies over time so long as they are close to her, as well as herself. This area effect will also slow enemies. Then next, for her third ability, Winter Storm, she pushes enemies back in a line with winter winds, doing small damage, and it does a bit of bonus damage if they hit a wall, kind of similar to Uller's Impale. Uller? Not Uller. Onher's Impale. Then, for her ultimate ability, it's called Blizzard, as you'd expect from the passive name Blizzard Warning. This ability starts a massive snowstorm around her, making her CC immune. Enemies inside the storm take damage over time, and the more stacks she has in her passive, the longer this lasts. So enemies are taking damage, they are greatly slowed within the area, and it lasts longer based on how many stacks she has. However, if she has 0 stacks of her passive, then the ability cannot be activated. The ultimate can be cancelled early because she is unable to do any of her other abilities. However, she would still be able to basic attack. However, the basic attacks or kills while this ability is activated will not add to the stacks of Blizzard Warning, so that it can't go on indefinitely. Next, for the Japanese pantheon, I would like to suggest Bishamon, the good luck god of war. Bishamon would likely be a guardian due to his protective role in Japanese mythology. His passive, Protection from Disease, makes him immune to damage over time effects, and allies around him resistant to it. Like, not all of his allies, like, on the map, but only the ones that are near him. So it's an aura that decreases the damage that damage over time effects have. Then for his first ability, I call it Warrior's Luck. It increases the crit chance of all allies around him, however, not himself. just the allies around him. Then for his second ability, I call it Enemy Misfortune. He charges forward. If he hits an enemy that is facing away, they will be slowed. If he is facing an enemy that is facing towards him, however, they will be disarmed. Kind of how Medusa's ultimate works. So if you're facing away from Medusa, you're just slowed. But if you're facing towards her, you are stunned. However, in this case, if you're running away, you're slowed. But if you're facing them, probably fighting, you will be disarmed. Then for his third ability, I call it Over Here. He throws his spear forward, dealing damage and taunting the first god hit. It stops at that god and does not pass through them. However, it will pass through minions, also damaging them. And then for his ultimate, I call it Shichi Huku Jin. He heals allies around him as he jumps into a flying boat with the other good luck gods, which I would have made Smite abilities for, but I haven't been able to figure out what exactly their abilities would be. So instead, I put them all together in an ultimate. He flies around and can land at any time, almost any time. When he lands, he heals and increases the attack speed of the allies around where he lands. So, if he enters a team fight with this, he will be buffing his allies as he lands. However, he won't damage any enemies as he lands. So this is more of a support ability for entering a fight than for damaging and greatly participating in the killing in a fight. However, if you do give your allies a buff, you're more likely to start killing your enemies. So that's why that's good. Now onto the Norse Pantheon. For the Norse Pantheon, I would like to suggest Madi, the god of battle and berserking. Madi would likely be a warrior, and his passive, which I call Enraging Presence, could be a aura ability or aura effect where all allies around him gain basic attack power. So their basic attacks do more damage, as the name implies. Then for his first ability, Berserker Charge, he runs forward with some control of his direction, similar to Geb's Rollout or Sun Wukong's Bull Charge. And he knocks aside minions' hit, passing through them, but stopping at and stunning the first god hits. So similar to Sun Wukong's Tiger, he stuns the first god hit. However, he knocks aside any enemy minions that he hits. Then for his second ability, I call it Non-Stop Assault. He swings his axe in a cone. If he kills an enemy with this attack, he can swing again until he stops killing. So, like how Ratatasker's dash used to work, where if you dash and hit someone, you could dash again. However, in this case, if he kills someone, he can then just swing again, assuming he kills another person. However, there is a maximum if he is only killing minions. So if he swings and kills a minion, he can only do it one more time. But if he kills a god, so long as he keeps killing gods, he will be able to continue doing it. Then for his third ability, which I call Numb to Pain, he greatly decreases the amount of damage he takes for a short time. So it's a buff, just greatly decreasing how much damage he takes. So he can run around still hurting people, but he is now a lot tankier than before. Then, for his ultimate ability, I call Endless Rage. He enters a massive fit of rage, becoming CC immune and greatly increasing his movement speed and attack power. While this ability is active, he cannot drop below 1 health. The duration increases with every kill he lands during this ability. Minions give less time than gods, but they still give some time. So he will become almost an unstoppable killing machine. But in order to make this balanced, it should be so that no matter how many minions he kills, he can't keep it up forever, because that would of course be crazy. Or another possibility is just removing the minions altogether, and for each god he kills, he increases the duration. Next, for the Norse Pantheon, I would like to suggest Vidar, the god of silence and revenge. Vidar would likely be either an assassin or a warrior. His passive, which I call Avenger, he would likely gain a power buff for each ally that is currently slain. So he'll be at his maximum power in a conquest match where he is the only survivor at that time. Then for his first ability, which I call Iron Shoe, he stomps his foot on the ground, damaging and slowing enemies around him. It's a very simple ability. Next is ability 2, which I call Aim for the Heart. He gains massive penetration bonus at the cost of movement speed for 1 basic attack. So it's kind of like Rom with his spirit arrows. However, in this case, you activate it, and for 1 basic attack, he has a massive amount of penetration. However, he is slower to balance how much penetration he gets. Then for his third ability, which I call Block the Jaws, in a short range in front of him, he disarms the god in front of him and gains a block stack that stops damage from the first basic attack that would hit him. So he basically disarms the person and then makes it so they can't actually damage him with a basic attack the second they come off of disarm. So it gives them some time to basically continue beating up the person they're attacking. Then for his ultimate, I call it Survivor of Ragnarok. For a short time, he is invincible to damage and crown control. His attack power and movement speed are also increased. And now for the Mayan Pantheon. The first god I would like to suggest for the Mayan Pantheon is Hunahpu, the hero twin of the sun. I think, much like his brother, Hunahpu would be a hunter, because they're brothers, so it makes sense that they would share similarities. For his passive, which I call the Light of Day, I can see it being, again, similar to Xbalanque's, where as he kills enemies, more specifically enemy gods, he gains permanent movement speed and cooldown. Not exactly his brother's, but similar in how it's obtained and how it works. Then for his first ability would be a toggle ability similar to Xbalanque's #1 as well. So this one I call Long Range Shot, as it increases the range of Hunahpu's shots. However, each basic attack costs mana, again similar to Xbalanque. Then for his second ability, which I call Play Ball, he kicks a ball forward that ricochets off of walls and enemies, doing damage to all enemies hit. It bounces off of minions, gods, any enemy. So if you aim it right, you can get it to hit multiple people, or you can get it to hit the same person multiple times. Then for his third ability, which I call Tackle, he leaps forward. If he hits an enemy, he stops and the enemy is then stunned. Then for his ultimate, which I call Brightest Day, the sun begins to brighten. After 3 seconds, enemies are stunned and blind. Hunahpu gains bonus movement speed and attack power upon activating this ability. Again, similar to Xbalanque's ultimate. However, in this case, it is the sun rather than night. Next, for the Mayan pantheon, Kama-Zotz, the god of bats. I think Kama-Zotz would likely be an assassin. His passive, which I call Surprise, makes it so if he's invisible, his basic attack is replaced with a leap. Now his first ability, which I call Bite, he dashes a short distance and latches onto an opponent, doing damage and healing himself based on the damage dealt. So basically it's a sort of vampire-like ability. He bites, damages, and heals. Next, for his second ability, which I call Swarm, at a target location he sends a swarm of bats. Enemies inside the area are slowed, and he is invisible when inside the swarm, until of course he attacks. Then for his third ability, which I call the Hidden, he becomes invisible to enemies and wards. He is unable to move, but will not be revealed unless he attacks or is attacked. Enemies will walk through him, so in order to figure out if he's hidden somewhere, you'll have to just start swinging around in the general area. And for his ultimate, I call it the Dead of Night. Around him, allies and himself become invisible and gain attack power buffs. Now, last but not least, is the Greek Pantheon. My first suggestion for the Greek Pantheon is Tartarus, the embodiment of torment. Tartarus would be a mage, and I believe his passive, which I call Punishment, makes it so his abilities do more damage based on the number of god kills the enemy has, of course, to a maximum, and the maximum increases with his level. So as he levels up, the amount of extra damage he's able to do because of his passive will increase. Then for his first ability, I call Screams of the Damned. Enemies around him in a full circle are feared, just run away, and they do take some damage. For his second ability, which I call Open Pit, at a ground target location, he opens a pit to Tartarus, the place, not the god, damaging and banishing enemies for a short time. After that time, they are knocked up as if they are spat out of Tartarus. Then, for his third ability, which I call Pulled Down to Tartarus, he pulls all enemies towards him in a line in front of him. So, just similar again to Susanoo's pull. They're just pulled in with, unless they have CC immunity, very little they can do about it. Then for his ultimate, which I call My Realm, a massive area around him is filled with darkness. Enemies that are within the area are slowed and slowly take damage over time. Within the area, he gains movement speed and attack power. So he places just a area in which he is more powerful and enemies are greatly inconvenienced at worst. Next for the Greek Pantheon is Icarus, he who once flew. Icarus would most likely be a hunter. Icarus's passive, which I call Crafting the Wings. With each basic attack, he gains a feather to add to his wings. When he has the maximum amount of feathers, he begins to hover and has increased movement speed. All of his abilities, however, need feathers to work. His first ability, which I call Escape, he takes to the air and lands soon after. The range of this ability is based on the number of feathers he has and how many he's willing to spend. His next basic attack after landing slows. With this ability, he can fly out of most situations. It's a leap, basically. And the number of feathers used is based on the distance that he decides to fly to. So if you fly a very short distance, it'll only cost 1 or 2 feathers. However, you can, using all of your feathers, you can go the maximum distance. And on the targeter, it'll probably tell you how far you are going to go with how many feathers. So if you go at max distance, it'll say the maximum number of feathers, halfway, half the feathers, and so on. So you can go from using 1 feather to just jump over a small wall, or all of your feathers to get as far away from a conflict as possible. Next, for his second ability, I call Wax and Feathers. This is a toggleable ability similar to Shibalonke's number 1. So, at the cost of some mana and 1 feather per basic attack, Icarus slows with his basic attacks. He, however, cannot gain feathers while this ability is active, as he spends feathers as fast as he would be making them. So 1 basic attack equals 1 feather. Normally, 1 basic attack gives you a feather. However, if Wax and Feathers is activated, then 1 basic attack decreases how many feathers you have by 1. Then for his third ability, which I call Flutter, he becomes CC immune and damage immune for a short time, and gains a movement speed buff and a Fatalis effect. So he basically does the Ravana backhand kick, whatever it's called, becoming CC immune and not taking damage for a short time. Then he lands again with movement speed, and now when he attacks, he does not slow down. And this lasts for a short time, then he can just, then when it wears off, he continues as he was. However, this ability, of course, as I mentioned before, uses some of the feathers he has. Then, for his ultimate ability, which I call Too Close to the Sun, he leaps to a ground target location, dealing damage where he lands and setting enemies on fire. When he lands, he has increased movement speed and does not suffer the movement speed debuff of basic attacking, so basically the Fatalis effect, as well as increasing his attack speed for a short time based on how many feathers he has. He cannot gain feathers from basic attacks when these buffs are activated, and this buff has to consume all of his current feathers.